This is political persecution. This is a persecution like never before. Nobody's ever seen anything like it. And again, it's a case that should have never been brought. It's an assault on America. And that's why I'm very proud to be here.
Joining me right now with reaction is former Acting U.S. Attorney General Matt Whitaker. Matt, great to see you this morning. Thanks very much. How do you view all of this?
Well, this is kind of what we predicted, which is this jury pool is going to be very tough to pick a fair and impartial jury. If you already have more than 50% of the jurors self-disqualify before they're even sort of explored as to whether they are biased or not, I think that's heading for some trouble. Remember, 70+% voted for Joe Biden, less than 20% voted for Donald Trump in the last election in Manhattan. So I don't expect that a bigger jury pool as they continue to bring people in is going to yield better results. What I worry the most is about someone that's not being truthful, that does have biases, that can't be fair and impartial, but that desperately wants to sit on this jury. Those are the people that really concern me.
Yeah, and do you think the judge is weeding out the Trump supporters with the questions that he's asking? Because he could do that, right?
Yeah, I mean, certainly there is a real possibility that if someone has a favorable opinion of Donald Trump, that they would be struck by the judge or ultimately by the prosecution. You know, I think everyone's entitled to a fair and impartial jury. The question is there a big enough pool that they can get to 12 plus alternates? Remember, they're going to have to probably pick 16 people ultimately to be on this jury, and in order to have enough that can make it to the goal line. But you know, that's not even talking about the facts and the law, which are also equally weak in this case.
Yeah. How does the election play into this from your standpoint, Matt? Because I'm reading a Cowen and Company report this morning, and the analyst there says this week's split screen is likely to continue through November. Biden in swing states railing against abortion restrictions post Roe v. Wade, and Trump in a courtroom railing against Biden. 203 days to November 5th.
Yeah, and this is the problem, is that these trials, especially this first one in New York, is keeping Donald Trump off the campaign trail. He can't go to North Carolina or Arizona or Nevada, anywhere where he needs to be to campaign to get the swing voters to see his side. And this is why so many say it's election interference, is because it keeps President Trump off the campaign trail. Now, what it does do is it keeps attention on President Trump, but you certainly don't want to be in a courtroom when you could be doing a rally or meeting voters.
Yeah, and do you think that they will get a fair trial? I mean, the New York Times poll shows President Trump ahead of President Biden by 1 point in a 2024 matchup. Got another poll that finds Americans view Trump's time in office more positively 4 years out. 42% remember the Trump era as good for America. Just 25% said that they believe President Biden's years in the Oval Office are good for our nation. So, layered on top of all of this with the attacks on Trump and the indictments is the fact of the matter that people view Trump's time in the White House more favorably.
And they should. There's a reason, as I was reading this morning, that young voters are moving towards Donald Trump, is because they know that his policies, and when he was president, the economy was working. It was creating jobs. It was keeping inflation low. You could buy a house with low mortgage rates. And the world feared us, quite frankly. It wasn't on fire like it is now, and there wasn't conflict and war everywhere you look. And so, there is no doubt that the world was a better place with Donald Trump at the helm versus Joe Biden, who appears to be, absent or unable to flex American muscle and American power to keep people like Iran and North Korea in check.
Yeah, I mean, look, this is expected to be a 6 to 8 week trial for President Trump. So that means that it ends, 1 month before the GOP convention, Matt? I mean, this is all so close to the election. No wonder people are calling it election interference. And in Mar-a-Lago over the weekend, President Trump said that he would absolutely testify. Do you believe he's going to testify?
Oh, I think he wants to testify. I'm sure he wants to tell his story and make sure the American people, understand what the facts and circumstances of these business records that he's being accused of falsifying actually are. But, as someone that's tried cases on both sides, a prosecutor and as a defense lawyer, I would not make that decision on whether or not to put someone on the stand until, I see how the evidence comes in, because this case could come in so weakly that there's no reason to put Donald Trump on the stand.
Okay, well, we'll see. I mean, the split screen of Trump in a courtroom and Biden, campaigning is going to continue, Matt. What else should we be watching in terms of the other trials that President Trump is facing?
Well, all the other trials are on hold. We have next week, we have the Supreme Court hearing on the immunity question. And I think that's going to be very important. And it's going to be, unlike this New York case, there's no way to listen to it or watch it. The Supreme Court does stream their audio, so you can listen to that. And I would encourage everyone to listen to the audio stream of the Supreme Court argument next week. And then obviously the documents case in Florida is a bit on hold as all of the complicated issues involving classified information are determined. But, there's no doubt that Jack Smith is desperate to have the same situation, get his cases to trial in order to keep Donald Trump off the campaign trail. But, to your point, the calendar is kind of running out of time as we head into the convention in July in Milwaukee. I think then you are in full campaign mode after that, and it's going to be very hard for a judge with a straight face to hold a trial in the middle of that.
I would imagine. Mike Baker, jump in here.
Matt, if I could just go back to this issue of jury selection here in New York. You talked about your concern over having jurors not be truthful when asking or answering their questions, during the selection process. To what degree do they do their own vetting, meaning when they're choosing jurors, to what degree do the teams go through social media and not just rely on what the juror selection candidates are saying?
Yeah, there's no doubt that the teams on both sides have the jury questionnaires, and they're doing their own due diligence and vetting of these folks to see what they can tease out of the information that they've been provided. And we'll see if there are some people that are disqualified ultimately because of being active on social media or otherwise. I think that what I'm mostly concerned about is someone that is just, by human nature is excited to be on this jury and is unwilling to be honest and will say practically anything to get on this jury. Those are the types of people you have to really suss out when you're picking a jury, and sometimes they're hard because they know exactly what they're doing as well.
Sure. Great point. All right, we will leave it there. Matt, great to talk with you as always. Thank you, sir.